Well, hope everyone's having a pleasant morning. We are headed down to DC this morning from Eastern Pennsylvania for something called the AUSA conference. And we activated the full self-driving feature on our Model S last night. Almost for scientific purposes, you might say. Just to see how well it worked. We have had the car for about 3 months, just over 90 days. Put 9,000 miles on it in the first month. And the basic autopilot works just great. The basic autopilot for 99% of people, for 99% of the driving you do, is all you're ever gonna need. And it is a, like, quantum leap above everything else you've ever used in your life. Even what you're starting to see in other vehicles, like on Ford, the Co-Pilot 360, and we've got a F-150 with it, and we've got a Super Duty with it, you know, with the lane centering system and the adaptive cruise control, and that's great, but the autopilot is like a whole nother level. It's like 10 or 15 or 20 years beyond that. And so for most people, for most of what you're ever gonna wanna do or need to do, the basic autopilot is just fine. But like I said, we just figured we'd try the full self-driving, and it's worked pretty well. As you can see on the screen, it completely changes your display from what it normally shows. And here, we'll turn it off for a second. That's what you normally see on your display. And then when you activate FSD, it sort of kicks out those other two little features, the trip monitor, the little navigation thing on the left, and then your energy monitor on the right, or whatever else you've set up in those two locations. And then all you see is what they call the FSD visualization. And it's pretty impressive. This is basically the car telling you what it thinks it sees. It's got your lane dividers, it's got your traffic cones, it's got your other cars, it's got that blue arrow indicating where it wants to take you. And that blue arrow changes depending if you're, you know, changing lanes or whatnot. You've still got your other display off to your right, which is your gigantic 17-inch high-resolution map, and your little turn indicator showing all the other turns it's planning on taking, depending on where you're going. But the advantage of a Model S or a Model X is that it gives you like an actual dashboard or an instrument panel in front of you. So you get a lot more real estate in terms of display area. Like the map on the Model S and the X is like double or triple the size of the one on the Model 3 and the Y. And that by itself is one of the many reasons you might want to get a Model S instead of a Y or a 3. Now, I've mentioned a lot of the things that this system does right. It does a whole lot of things right. It'll navigate you all the way to your destination. It'll take your on-ramps for you. It'll take your off-ramps. It'll merge. It'll change lanes when it thinks it needs to. It'll do what autopilot already does, which is speed up or slow down depending on the traffic ahead of you, and depending on the speed that you've set, the maximum speed, which is off on the right. We've got it on 85 this morning. And then it'll keep you in the lane and do avoidance when somebody else merges into you, or tries to merge into you, or tries to, you know, do something else stupid. And then, again, what the full self-driving will do is, based on its read, based on its interpretation of the vehicles around you, in front of you, to your left or right, and I guess even behind you, although that's not completely clear, it will select the best lane to drive in. And it does an okay job of that, but not that good a job of that. And that's the one area where you still need to kind of keep your thinking cap on and do your own analysis and come to your own conclusions, and then tell it what to do to a much greater extent than really you should. The car's general inclination is to stay in whatever lane that it's in to the greatest extent possible. And so right now, we're in the passing lane, we're behind a car, so we're held up. We can't actually, you know, go the speed we want to go. And what you might think the car would do is change lanes to get around the slower traffic. And it doesn't really do that. And so what you need to do, a lot more of than you should, is what I'm doing now. Doing a manual lane change by getting on the blinker, getting one lane over, and getting around this slower traffic that's sort of squatting in the passing lane there. And I'm not sure if it's the programming, or I'm not sure if it's like some setting on in the full self-driving software that tells it, you know, not to change lanes too many times. But it just to a fault, it will try to stay in the lane that it's in, and will only change lanes. It's almost like it'll go to extreme lengths to avoid having to change lanes. Okay, now again, we just passed this guy here. So we're executing a manual lane change by getting on the blinker. Okay. And then we're in the passing lane. We're passing slower traffic, as one does. And then watch what happens when we get around this semi. Okay, watch what happens. So we're around the semi. The lane to our right is clear and unobstructed. And what the car ought to do immediately, or almost immediately, is get out of the passing lane to make room for maybe traffic behind us that's trying to overtake us. But it doesn't do that. It just wants to sit here in the passing lane. And you might say, well, hey, look, there's another car on your right there that you're coming up on that you're about to pass. Sure there is, but there's no reason this car couldn't have gotten over, spent, 20, 30, 40 seconds, a minute, however long it would have spent, and then gotten back into the passing lane when it was time to pass somebody. But it just doesn't do that. It wants to squat in the lane that it's in for as long as it possibly can. And that's kind of the problem with this system, the full self-driving. We've seen so many, on so many occasions, a Tesla driver will be sitting there, camped out in the left lane, going the speed limit, or maybe even a little below the speed limit, and it's just sitting there, and it has a line of traffic building up behind it, and it's pissing off a lot of other drivers. But the car, which obviously has either autopilot or FSD, full self-driving engaged, it just does not have the sense enough to get out of the way. And almost from like a perspective of public relations, or like wanting to make people not hate Teslas, it's like the car should know enough not to make itself into an obstacle, and not to be like a Prius driver. Prius drivers are always camped out in the passing lane, and it just pisses everyone off. And Tesla should, the people writing the software for this thing, for the full self-driving and the autopilot, which does the same damn thing, they ought to have the sense to tell the car, hey, when you're not passing, when the lane next to you is open, get out of the passing lane. But they don't, and so it relies on the common sense of the driver. And you know how American drivers are, with their what you might call their lane discipline. They don't have any. Unlike in a place like Germany, where it's like a violation, and you're paying a lot of money if you get caught doing what all these American drivers do, camping out in the passing lane, because it's a life or death proposition there. Because some people go 60 or 80 miles an hour, some people go 100, some people go 150, and the only way it works, and the only way you don't have like massive carnage on the highway, is by everybody following the same set of rules. And the basic rule in Germany is, when you're not passing someone, get the hell out of the passing lane. Again, another example, we just got done getting around an 18-wheeler. The lane to our right is open, but the car has no intention of using it. And it's what you might call the fatal flaw of this software package. If every car on the road drove like this, you'd have total chaos and pandemonium. And we're headed towards a time in the not too distant future, maybe in the next 10 or 15 years, where every car is going to drive itself. And if they don't fix this problem, it's going to be an issue. So this Tesla driver ahead of us, we actually talked to him the last time we stopped, and he is 100% manual control. And so he is smart enough to get out of the way, but that's just because he's a good driver. This car, which is doing all the driving for itself, it's great at a lot of things, but at this one thing, no, it really isn't. I guess I'll leave it there. I don't want to rag on the system too much. Again, it does a very, very good job. What we don't have hardly any of is the phantom braking, where it'll just slam on the brakes for no reason. And some people have complained about that. A lot of people have complained about that. What we also don't have is the car sort of drifting into other people's lanes. It does a great, great job of staying in the lane. And it also does a great job of speeding up or slowing down, depending on what's going on around it. It's just that one thing it doesn't do that it really needs to do. And hopefully they'll make that change sometime in the future, because otherwise it's brilliant. Is it worth the $15,000 you got to pay for it? The one-time fee of $15,000? No, hell no. Is it worth the monthly subscription fee if you want to like turn it on when you know you're going to be doing a lot of driving, and then like unsubscribe when you know you're not going to be doing a ton of driving? That's kind of for you to decide. We did 15,000 miles in this car without it and did just fine. But we do see how this could be a very, very useful and helpful thing to have. If, for instance, you do a lot of commuting on heavily congested highways, this would be very, very useful for that. As one tends to in the Northeast. And so I'd say like the verdict is still out. For us, for what we do, not really worth it to have this subscription turned on all the time. That's more money out of your pocket, and Tesla already gets enough of your money. But again, if you do a lot of miles consistently, like day in and day out, especially on the highway, yeah, it's probably worth it. Probably. But at this point, you can still live without it too. Anyway, hope that helps, and hope you all are having a pleasant day. It's the Monday of Columbus Day weekend. The traffic's not too bad today because, well, a lot of people are still working from home, and a lot of the other people that tend to go to work might have today off. So we're just enjoying the beautiful, beautiful weather on the eastern seaboard today on the way down to DC. Hope you all have a great day, and we will talk to you later.